It really depends on the challenge, and it really depends. Sometimes it's not a surprise. It's sort of never really a surprise, but sometimes it just comes up. You didn't expect it, a particular problem to be so big for production. In this case, for Transformers 3, the building collapse sequence, I think that's what you're referring to. We didn't really expect, the CG supervisor knew, Doug Sutton knew that this was going to be a problem, and that's why we kind of shifted and chose a particular path in terms of production, which was to use a different renderer for that sequence. But we didn't know it was going to be that challenging, and it was an incredible amount of computational resources that were needed to complete that particular sequence of Transformers 3. Not only were there a lot of reflections and light paths that are more complex than traditional light paths, so reflection, refractions through the windows, but the assets involved were huge. I mean, we're talking about this driller, this robot worm that's crushing a building with all the everything in the building is being shown on screen, and so it's a huge amount of geometry. So that was even more challenging than we expected. But some other times, and there are a lot of times where we can really break it down, and there are just groups that gather, and we break down the problem and have people work on them. So in rendering, so Pacific Rim was a good example of us knowing that it was going to be very challenging, because we were using a new renderer. It was Arnold. So on Pacific Rim, we had to rewrite a bunch of our pipeline and our shaders to make sure that they were going to be able to render the show. And we hit a lot of issues during the production. We knew we were going to hit a lot of issues, maybe not that much, but it was and there it's just a question of having enough people to work on all the issues. And so as the issues were creeping up, we just started having more people help us and task people with the different problems. I think there's still a huge challenge behind rendering photorealistic humans. I mean, it's still, people try, there's always like a particular show that tries to do it, and rendering a face, an actor, reproducing a performance, or carrying through a performance, either through a transfer that happened, or in this case it would be a creature talking. And anything related to a performance and a rendering, like a person that has an emotion or a creature that has an emotion is a challenge. It's still a challenge, and that will be one of them, in the next 36 months. What I'm looking forward to is finally starting to converge towards a toolkit where we're going to have a unified framework in which we can render everything we do in one framework. And this has always been the holy grail for a lot of people, because at ILM we're very pragmatic in terms of what we use for particular tasks. As I said earlier, we really use what we think is best for a particular task. So if that involves having different renderers for different tasks, in the past this has definitely been a common thing, and so we have a lot of different tools that will render. So we have a particular pipeline that will render water, for example. Plume will render smoke, explosions, and dust. Hard surfaces will be rendered in RenderMan or Arnold, and so I'm looking forward to having a pipeline where we can render everything together, and this is especially relevant because these days the industry is progressively shifting towards physically based rendering, and some of us have already shifted. And with physically based rendering, there's this kind of promise that everything works together, so everything bounces on each other. And we're talking about more complex light paths so that we can simulate a lot better the lighting that happens. The light bounces on walls. So, for example, water reflecting, or the water foam having the bounce of a ship, which traditionally is something that we might not render, because not only it's a complicated light path, but it's also usually rendered in different renderers. So I would say that would be something that I look forward to. Some unified framework where we can render everything together. It's my first FMX, and it's a great comfort. I mean, it's almost like a compressed version of SIGGRAPH. Incredible organization. I really like there's a dinner almost every night, so you get to really meet a lot of fellow speakers and fellow practitioners. So yeah, I've enjoyed it a lot, and I love Stuttgart.